neutrality in Europe after 2022.
This video is about neutral countries in Europe, how recent events have impacted neutral countries in Europe, what may be the consequences for them, and what the end of Scandinavian neutrality may mean for Europe. One of the most substantial changes to European politics since the Russian invasion of Ukraine regards neutrality. And since Finland joined NATO, I thought I'd take a moment to talk about neutrality in Europe and how it is changing. Sweden and Finland abandoning their neutrality to seek out NATO membership will have an enormous impact on the European political landscape that should not be overlooked. And this war will also have a substantial impact.
Why is Ireland neutral? Wasn't Ireland part of the Allies?
Here's something that many have overlooked throughout the last year. Ukraine, officially, was a neutral country. I am sure many of you are surprised by this. It is often, as mentioned before, overlooked. But yes, technically, on paper, Ukraine was neutral. In its 1991 Declaration of Independence...
Wait, Ireland was not in World War II? You're telling me not a single Irish soldier was fighting for the Allies against Nazi Germany? Wow, no? What? Only some volunteers. The fuck? Why would they? Because Hitler, like, killing 6 million Jews and trying to kill even more?
Her lawmakers
I always thought Irish were in World War II, man. I never knew that.
A neutral state. And that
God damn my Irish brothers, what are you doing, brothers?
Ukrainian constitution.
Churchill even offered them Northern Ireland to join and they said no. Fuck off, that's not true. They offered Ireland North Ireland and they said no?
In 1996 as part of the Budapest
fucking how's Ireland doing?
As part of this agreement, Ukraine also gave up its Soviet-inherited nuclear weapons and got guarantees on sovereignty from Russia and the United States. Russia violated that agreement in 2014, and Ukraine consequently dropped its neutrality. And Ukraine has spent the years since trying to find either a new partnership with the West or get guarantees from Russia that it will finally respect its sovereignty. And what happened to Ukraine forced the remaining neutral European countries to face a very uncomfortable question. Namely, what good did neutrality do for Ukraine?
Not much. I'm a believer, as I'm obviously a geopolitical expert, Chad, right? You can't be neutral in this world anymore. I don't believe that. The world is so complex with globalization and human crimes and everything. You can't be neutral anymore. You can't be neutral anymore.
We can all currently observe is that Ukraine's neutrality did not guarantee her peace. The opposite. Ukrainian neutrality made Ukraine more vulnerable.
I can't watch a video.
And neutral Europe is also forced to confront another very uncomfortable fact. That being that neutrality, ultimately, means that if you are attacked, you will stand alone. Yes, many states are sending military aid to Ukraine, but no soldiers. Ukraine will fight this alone. Ukrainians will have to win this alone. All that states who support Ukraine can do is attempt to alleviate the Ukrainian suffering by sending them weapons superior to Russian weapons, share intelligence on Russia, provide military training and logistics, sheltering Ukrainian refugees, putting pressure onto Russia, and guaranteeing Ukraine NATO membership after this war to guarantee she will no longer be alone.
What the fuck, Garrett?
Confronting
life is so weird. You guys know Garrett. That guy gifted 400 sub last month, and he just followed. I see everything, Garrett.
Sweden has spent years now being continuously harassed by the Russians.
You are the CIA
For almost
agent.
20
Fuck you,
years,
Apple.
the Russians have been flying nuclear bombers into Swedish airspace, simulated nuclear attacks on Stockholm and Gotland, harassed Swedish ships with submarines, violated...
Russia did evil things? What?
Her territorial waters with nuclear submarines, constantly threatening the Swedes, and tried to interfere in Swedish politics. The Swedes reacted by bolstering their military.
A lot of people say lately that they don't get notifications when I'm online. It's like I'm shadow banned or something.
Recent events have had an even greater impact on Finland. If you ever read any history books about the Winter War with first-hand accounts by Finnish veterans, or if you ever interviewed or watched an interview with or talked to a Finnish Winter War veteran, you will have probably heard the following sentence: "We had to fight alone." It is almost the unofficial motto of an entire generation of Finland. It is a historic fact that has heavily lingered in the historic consciousness of the Finnish people since the Winter War, and consequently had a substantial impact on shaping the Finnish national character and identity across multiple generations. Finland's neutrality was the result of something called Finlandization. After a set of wars in which the Soviet Union attempted to conquer Finland, Finland was able to retain...
I wonder what the Winter War feels like in World Ablaze. Is it like unwinnable? I know the devs. They probably give Finland plus 80% defense or some shit.
Sovereignty in exchange for surrendering territory.
Did you hear about the new German aid package to Ukraine for 3 billion? Yes, I heard about it. Today I was on the marketplace and free people, I swear, free people demonstrated it. Idiots. I'm proud of my country. I'm not often proud of my country, but I'm proud my country is aiding Ukraine.
And becoming neutral for a treaty with the Soviet
free
Union.
people, I swear to
in
God.
accordance with this treaty,
2 old
if
men
Finnish
and a
borders
50-year-old
were
woman.
ever violated by NATO
I did
during
a
a
spit
war
emote
with
on
the
that.
Soviet
Lisa said,
Union.
you know, we were walking past them and I do this to them. Like, I don't really spit, I just do. And Lisa said, fucking behave yourself. And I'm like, what the fuck? They have to behave themselves. Why the fuck do I have to behave?
Finland would have to join the war on the side of the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union, in exchange for not interfering in the internal politics of Finland, would get a say in Finnish defense politics. This, in case you wondered, is also why the Finnish armed forces used to use a lot of Soviet equipment. So the entirety of Finland's neutrality was conditioned on an understanding and partnership with Russia. In other words, Finnish neutrality was based on an agreement that could have only worked as long as Russia was deemed a trustworthy international partner. And this is important, because it meant that Finland's neutrality, in many ways, was one of the most important diplomatic factors indicating Russia's trustworthiness on the international stage. Meaning, Finnish neutrality was more valuable to Russia than it was to Finland, because it meant that no matter what Russia did, as long as Finland remained neutral, Russia still had a degree of trustworthiness on the international stage. Finnish trust in Russia to uphold this agreement was a measure of Russian trustworthiness. You may now understand why Finland breaking with its neutrality has done...
By the way, who is the president of Finland right now? She was prime minister. But prime minister is what really matters, right? She partied too much? Poor girl, man. That was so sexist. That's what I call real sexism, man. But there's women! There's women in Finland! She partied with her friends. She partied with her friends. How... That motherfucking bitch. How fucking dare she? All male politicians are mega fucking corrupted, man. She did a fucking party, man. With her own friends during Corona. We had the same in Germany. This is the truth. Germans will tell you. When Germany had an election 2 years ago, 1 year ago, there was 3 candidates. Annalena Baerbock, woman from the Greens, Armin Laschet, a man from the Black Party, Angela Merkel Party, and the current Chancellor of Germany, Olaf Scholz, Red Party. Now, these 3 people were fighting for the chancellorship. Now, the media was dragging a lot of shit on the woman. So she lost like 10%. She was actually about to win, but then she got fucked. What happened here? So, Annalena Baerbock has been exposed, truthfully. What they did is they found out she faked her curriculum vitae a bit. There were certain things in her curriculum vitae that were faked. You know, that's not cool, 100%. But they went on her everywhere. The biggest paper in Germany, Bild Zeitung, destroyed her. On the other side, Olaf Scholz and Armin Laschet did so much worse. Olaf Scholz, man, he is not speaking out in the Wirecard scandal. Millions of fucking taxpayers lost all their investments with Wirecard. Cum-ex, right? He let fucking elitist people, when he was the leader of the BaFin, which was the financial thingy in Germany, they scammed people, they got taxes back 2 times. He was the leader there. He pushed a law in Hamburg, when he was the mayor of Hamburg, that they were allowed to use vomit chemicals to make people vomit that were in custody, and a young man died from that shit. Now, you compare that, the man who won the election, to a woman who faked her curriculum vitae a bit. And with all due respect, when we come down to reason and logic, and we don't talk like shitty Bushman 7, she's though, like a fucking child, man. You come to a conclusion that yes, and once again, I say this as a centrist, and someone that loves logic and reason, and this is not a political general, I say this, they used sexist ways to fuck this woman up. They know that a lot of voters are gonna be like, oh, this woman, you can't trust a woman, I gotta vote for a man. And she lost the election, and a guy that did 100 times worse stuff got away with the election because of media banter, bro. And that is how this shit fucking works, man.
It is a complete disaster for Russia. Overall, the current geopolitical situation in Europe is nothing short of a disaster for Russia. Europe now basically stands united, as it has not been since the Napoleonic Wars. And yes, we have to go as far...
You tend more left, I think. You often think that TommyKay has left-wing agendas, where in reality, reason and logic dictate you to be a bit more left. Reason and logic and intelligent progressive thinking is just a little bit more left. So it looks to you like I'm left-wing, even though I just use reason and logic.
Back as the Napoleonic Wars to appreciate how substantial the changes to European security are, since it was then that Sweden
So you
became
are left,
a
did you
neutral
just
state.
listen?
In many ways, the changes to the European political landscape remind me of the end of the First and Second World Wars, and how the ends of these conflicts completely trashed the previous geopolitical European system, commonly known as the concept of Europe. After the Napoleonic era, the concept of Europe was a system of power balances created among European states with the intention of preventing major European wars. And a core factor in the concept of Europe was neutrality. Denmark, Sweden, Norway, the Netherlands, and in particular Belgium were all neutral states in the 19th.
So pretty much a bit leftist, left-leaning. I think that's propaganda, whereas I only try to follow reason and logic with big problems the world is facing. And then putting the label left-leaning on me is propaganda to put me into a corner that could be attacked. Oh, he's a lefty.
And their neutrality was intended to be a core component of maintaining a peaceful balance in Europe, in particular Belgium. Belgium did not choose neutrality. Neutrality was forced on it by the British. The British believed this Belgian neutrality would prevent both France and Germany from dominating Europe. And the neutrality of the Belgian state was a form of neutrality that we no longer see today because it is considered to be a complete political failure. A dependent neutrality with foreign guarantors, meaning Belgium did not build a huge army to defend themselves, but would rely on others in case of being invaded.
The war in Ukraine. Okay, the war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine. I'm a lefty because of the war in Ukraine. I believe Ukraine should win the war and is legitimately the good guy in this war. So now we take, for many, many hours, at proof, like what Russia is doing and what Ukraine is doing, and you can, in my opinion, you come to the logical conclusion that Russia is the evil guy in this conflict, with a lot of fucking proof. So what the fuck are you talking about? You're pro-immigration. Once again, a country needs immigration. We see it all around Europe right now. You need workers in Europe. There's not enough people fucking in Europe. You need immigrants. Look at what happened to the UK when they didn't let the Romanian truck drivers in. Their whole economy fucking crashed, man. You need immigrants. That's a fact of life. Without them, if your societies don't work anymore. Yes, there's issues. 100%. I fully believe it. There's a lot of issues with immigration. But you fucking need it. End of story. That's a logical, reasonable take. People complain about immigrants taking jobs from natives. They don't want the jobs. Dude, like what happened in the last 10 years in my country is that all the package people from Amazon that gives you packages, they're now Arabs and Ukrainians. 10 years ago was Germans. It's not that they're stealing the jobs. The Germans just don't want to take these jobs anymore. What are most Germans doing? I read a book. I'm reading a book right now. 50% of Germans do Abitur, which is the highest school. They all want to study, and it makes sense. When a country gets more educated, the young people, they want to get educated, they want to go to university, they want to get degrees. They don't want to drive trucks, they don't want to be package people. You lose lower tier jobs. So you have to fill these lower tier jobs with immigration. That is a fact of life. And if you don't do it, you fall apart. The German health system, the German nursing system, if we will be anti-immigration, if the AfD will expel all the immigrants, our entire health system will fall apart. We will have no more people on building sites. It will be the end of it. You have to be pro-immigration if you follow reason and logic.
And Germans to support
and that's
them.
Not
and if Belgium
talk,
was invaded by Germany, then Britain and France would come to defend Belgium. Now, this may sound great on paper, but if you know even the most basic minimum about the history of the First and Second World Wars, then you will know that this idea was a complete and utter disaster for Belgium, and really for Europe at large. So well. Belgian neutrality was supposed to prevent a large European war, but because it was constructed to entangle others, it did the opposite. And
do you think with the increase of AI mechanization, eventually immigration would be needed on the scales today? That's I don't know. That seems super, like, do you think in the next 10 years we're gonna have machines doing these jobs? I don't think so.
As a catalyst for a large European war. And in an act of incredible European wisdom, the kind of which you will only find here, it was decided that Belgium should continue this form of neutrality after the First World War. The Second World War also unraveled the weaknesses of neutrality that we touched upon before. The Netherlands, Denmark, Belgium, Austria, Yugoslavia, Norway, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, and Finland were all neutral countries. and that neutrality did absolutely nothing to protect them from Nazi or Soviet aggression. Turkey, Sweden, and Portugal were also neutral states during this period. And
that's already what my point is. You can't be neutral anymore in this world. Someone is going to exploit your neutrality, like Russia is with Ukraine.
In horror, how useless neutrality was for those who were invaded. We in fact know today that Nazi Germany was planning to invade Sweden and would have gone through with it if things hadn't started going south for them in 1943. So at the end of the Second World War, these countries faced the same question that many face watching the war in Ukraine today. Namely the question of what good did neutrality do for Ukraine in the end? In 1945, after the war was over, neutral countries in Europe had to ask what good did neutrality do for anyone in Europe.
Like
and consequently, most of them decided to end neutrality.
But Switzerland also had to defend their neutrality in World War II by showing the Germans, hey, we got bunkers, you want to come, you gotta fucking die. You gotta defend your neutrality too with weapon power,
NATO.
right? And then
with that comparison, you may now see why I believe that what we are currently seeing can be somewhat compared to the end of the Second World War. In particular, the fate of one country forced many to confront the disadvantages of neutrality: Czechoslovakia. As you all probably know, during the Munich conference, the Nazis were granted the Sudetenlands as the Czechoslovaks were sold out by the British and French. But there's one point in the Munich agreement.
There's a typo, Sudetenland.
That many forget. Czechoslovakia was allied to Britain and France, but as part of the Munich Agreement, Czechoslovakia was forced by the Nazis to give up all alliances and become a neutral state. As we know today, this neutrality was never meant to be sincere or respected by the Nazis. The Nazis used this neutrality to neuter the remaining Czechoslovak state so they could later invade and annex it. Meaning, the Nazis were aware that neutrality meant a country would stand alone, and therefore used neutrality as a weapon against their Czech victims. In fact, the Nazis would continue to abuse neutrality throughout the Second World War. Something we often...
This guy literally voted AFD and then the Greens. Obviously not a commie. Is he, you done? I'm a true centrist. I voted AFD and then I voted the Greens. Gotta keep balance, bro.
Don't forget about the invasions of Denmark, Norway, Belgium, and the Netherlands is that the Nazis officially justified every single one of them by claiming that they were securing and protecting the neutrality of these countries. This is something worth remembering today when Russia justifies its aggressions towards neighbors by claiming that they are doing so in order to protect their neutrality. But if neutrality is so risky, then you may ask, why even do neutrality in the first place? Well, it's not just geopolitics. It also has a lot to do with internal development. Neutrality is great, especially for citizens of neutral states. There's a reason why the Swiss passport is the single most valuable personal document that a human being can own. Swiss citizens have visa-free travel and entry to 185 countries. You will never be extradited from Switzerland to another country, no matter what crime you committed abroad, even if it is genocide. You're able to open a bank account.
What the fuck? So the most scary dictator ever would be a Swiss dictator.
Everywhere in the world. You have the least restrictions on owning foreign bank accounts, as well as on owning and...
Imagine Putin is asking Switzerland for citizenship.
Transferring foreign currencies, foreign assets, and foreign properties. To add on top of that, the Swiss can work and live visa-free in 152 countries, and even enter 52 of these without their passports. Swiss citizenship is the most valuable citizenship in the world, followed by Singaporean citizenship.
Germany's ranked
Neutral citizenship is more valuable than citizenship of non-neutral states. The passports of Switzerland, Austria, Singapore, Costa Rica, Ireland, Japan, and Panama grant their holders more economic and travel liberties than the passports of other countries in their region. Neutrality, if well managed, is very beneficial to citizens. And this is not just restricted to neutral states that are democratic. A non-democratic neutral state like Singapore can grant the same benefits, and it is also not restricted to what is commonly known as the West. Yugoslavia, for example, was the single most open and well-functioning of all the communist states. Yugoslav neutrality meant that Yugoslav citizens had far more liberties and benefits than citizens of any other communist state. They could travel abroad, get educated abroad, attain and spend foreign currencies. Neutrality can also be mismanaged though. Mexico is a neutral state, but plagued by instability, Mexico was never able to take advantage of this in the same way that Panama and Costa Rica did. Neutrality can...
Well, Switzerland, Costa Rica, Panama, it seems like you need to offer a bunch of capitalist, low taxes, man, and tax havens. That's how you get away with good neutrality.
Only provide benefits to citizens if there's a functioning state behind it that can guarantee those benefits to citizens. If the state is dysfunctional, neutrality itself can gradually erode. But above all, neutrality comes at a cost. Almost every neutral country has mandatory military service and usually keeps an effective military force. As valuable as the Swiss passport is, all Swiss men have to serve a mandatory 5 years of their life
fuck
in the
off.
Swiss
No way you gotta go 5 years. Wait, the United Arab Emirates are rank 1 now. Switzerland is fucking... They're not doing that well anymore. He corrected himself in the comments. Oh, he did a mistake there. 5 years? There's no fucking way. 5 years? A man is gone from the market?
Maintaining that army. And this is to guarantee Swiss neutrality, because one thing we often forget about...
No, Switzerland was not tied with them. Yes, they're tied, but Switzerland has less visa-free ones.
As mentioned before, is that
Germany
neutrality,
wins.
despite all its benefits, ultimately means that you will stand alone in case of war. You have no friends. You also have no enemies. But because of this, everyone is a potential
I like that,
enemy.
to teach young guys.
If you want an idea of how big defense spending can be for neutral countries and how damaging it can also be, all you need to do is look at Yugoslavia. It is commonly known by now that one of the main reasons Yugoslavia collapsed was its massive crippling national debt. That national debt came to be through two factors. First, Tito took a huge loan from the IMF in the 1950s that he knew Yugoslavia could never pay back, but he didn't care. Tito was convinced that capitalism would collapse and end within his lifetime, so he took this massive
I knew a lot of Balkan
IMF
people in my
loan
life. Like, I grew up with them. They all loved Tito. They were always very pro-Tito, man. But I think they never think deep enough to see how actually he's responsible for the downfall of Yugoslavia with shit like this.
Build Yugoslav infrastructure in the belief that the banks he borrowed the money from would no longer exist in a few decades. And the second factor that so immensely racked up the Yugoslav national debt, and which often is overlooked, was Yugoslav defense spending. Yugoslav defense spending was massive, and for good reason. The Soviet Union had plans to invade Yugoslavia and turn it into a Soviet puppet on at least 3 occasions. Tito had spies in the Warsaw Pact who told him of this, but Tito had to also worry about a possible invasion by NATO. So, Tito had to build a Yugoslav army that could on its own fight off a Warsaw Pact invasion, which meant buying a huge amount of Western weapons, but Tito also had to build a Yugoslav army so it could fight off a NATO invasion, which meant buying an equally big arsenal of Soviet weapons. But to add the cherry on top of this defense bill, Tito remembered the Hitler-Stalin Pact, when Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union conspired to carve up Poland. He was haunted by that event and feared that America and the Soviet Union could secretly conspire to invade Yugoslavia at the same time and carve it up between them. And because of this, Tito also built a huge domestic military industry so the Yugoslav army could fight against both NATO and the Warsaw Pact at the same time. All in all, this enormous defense spending created one of the largest weapons arsenals in Europe, and the enormous costs of creating and maintaining that huge arsenal are one of the main reasons for the collapse of Yugoslavia. In a cruel bit of irony, that arsenal was in the end used by the people's...
When I watch videos like this, I gotta really play Democracy 4 on stream, man. I gotta really fucking do that. It's a game where you build your own country and you're the president and you make decisions. I need to do that, man.
Who made up Yugoslavia.
I'm kinda out of time, guys. I'm unfortunately out of time.
What are you still doing here, mate? Jeez. Well, if you want to see more, click these videos. Have fun. Looking good, boy.